If you want to know how extreme is the social decline that is spreading all over the United States, all you need to do is walk the streets of our bigger cities. You don't even have to go to the bad areas to see the absurdities that are eating away our communities and destroying them from within. As we will show you in this video, even in the best parts of Washington, D.C., filth, squalor, and disease are everywhere. New images show that only a couple of blocks away from the White House, countless needles can be seen on the ground. Homeless encampments are taking over national parks, and the rate of delinquencies has spiked to the highest levels in history. The same is true for many other areas that used to be prosperous and economically and socially stable. Unfortunately, their decay is happening at a frightening pace and will only continue to accelerate as economic conditions go from worse to catastrophic in 2023. We have a lot to cover in this video, but before moving on, we kindly ask you to support our work with a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Some people may not believe this, but at one point, Philadelphia was one of the greatest cities in the world. But nowadays, the city of Benjamin Franklin is filled with prime examples of the social insanity that is rippling across the country. On Twitter, one user shared a video while walking the city's streets, witnessing dozens of people from different backgrounds passed out on the sidewalks, while others, clearly under the influence of illegal substances, were in a catatonic state that would shock anyone. But the truth is that, after years of neglect, no one is really surprised to hear that this is going on in Philadelphia. But what about a block from the White House? A video shared by Benny Johnson exposed scenes that seem like they've been taken out of a zombie movie. Exactly one block behind the White House, dozens of homeless encampments were scattered throughout city streets and even into national parks. Severe sanitation issues, including human waste, used needles, and trash piling up everywhere, left Johnson in disbelief. At D.C. Sparkle Street, glass from smashed car windows posed a threat to everyday citizens walking by. Even in front of St. John's Cathedral, garbage dominated the landscape. Until 2017, Johnson said he didn't see a single tent near public buildings. As he interviewed local residents, it became clear that people don't feel safe, and they say that new problems emerge on a daily basis. In fact, local reports reveal that from 2020 to 2022, there was a 36% rise in the rate of serious offenses, with 14% of those leaving fatal victims. At the same time, the rate of cases of illnesses caused by the abuse of illicit substances shot up by almost 70%. Disease, decay, and people that don't care about this nation running things and running them directly into the ground. This is an apt metaphor for a country in decline, Johnson stressed. On the West Coast, things are no different. In recent years, Portland, once considered one of the finest cities in America, has become something short of a dystopia, where shop owners sleep with self-defense tools behind their pillows, and citizens must act as law enforcement agents. During an interview with the National Review, Tritech Bikes owners Dylan Carrico Rogers says he slept at his shop for 7 months with multiple self-defense tools under his pillow. Rogers noted that in less than a year, his store was battered by break-ins, theft, and vandalism. Portland's serially understaffed law enforcement agency was nowhere to be found, and in the face of $25,000 of stolen bike parts, Tritech's insurance company was ready to jump ship. They said, "If you claim another one, we're just gonna drop you," Rogers said. "So, I'm paying $1,200 every 3 months to be told that I have to replace everything on my own dime. And then at the same time, officers don't show up. So we're just in a free-for-all." In August 2022, the lifelong Portland resident packed up and decided to leave the city. By that point, the building landlord told me that it wasn't worth it anymore, Rogers continued. The graffiti, property damage, constant break-ins, and unattended to official reports were just no longer worth the investment. He tore up a 3-year lease. The building's vacant now, the business owner said. This is the Portland way of life. You have people that are just blatantly taking advantage of the fact that there are no law enforcement officers, Rogers highlighted. This is spread everywhere now. It's not just the Portland bike shops. Grocery store workers are getting attacked because we have addicts that are literally walking in and doing these blitz raids. You're seeing more and more people pull out, he emphasized. And in turn, when people like me and other business owners close up and we leave, then you have no economy, and everything continues to get worse. As businesses depart from core urban areas, the United States is left with even more impoverished cities. Believe it or not, Detroit used to be the largest hub for the U.S. auto industry just a few decades ago. But that rapidly changed after automation and foreign manufacturing reshaped the whole industry, making the number of jobs sharply decline. Today, the city's poverty rate is at a staggering 39.8% of the population. Meanwhile, the rate of serious delinquencies is the second highest in the country. Urban decay is still rife in Detroit while it claws its way back from bankruptcy. Since the turn of the century, it has lost almost 30% of its population, given that conditions continue to deteriorate. Similarly, in the nearby town of Flint, Michigan, the decline of American manufacturing and the financial ruin of many companies that contributed to the growth of the region has resulted in the loss of hundreds of thousands of middle-class jobs. And over the past decade, Flint's population has declined rapidly at a rate of 12.2% per year. Infamously, the city has also suffered from drinking water that had not been properly treated for lead contaminants from old pipes. Now, over 40% of its residents live below the poverty line, and that rate keeps growing with each passing year. The same has happened to St. Louis, Missouri, and Albany, Georgia. Rampant rates of theft have driven thousands of companies out of business, and the ones that survived moved their operations elsewhere. Unemployment rates in these cities have spiked to alarming levels, and according to official data, about 25 and 32% of the citizens currently living in St. Louis and Albany, respectively, are poor or nearly poor. In New York City, poverty levels have become so oppressive that its homelessness crisis is spiraling out of control. The Daily Mail reports that the city has called the National Guard to deal with the displacement crisis that is overwhelming homeless shelters and facilities as the staff are unable to cope with the surge. National Guard reservists are being deployed to help with day-to-day operations at many shelters, including managing the capacity, distributing food, and helping out with staff shortages. There are well over 65,000 people currently living in New York City's shelters, close to 13,000 of which have become homeless in the past year, according to the Department of Homeless Services. Do you remember any other period in history in which government officials of any city brought in the National Guard because homelessness had exploded to unprecedented levels? This crisis is unfolding at a pace that is just breathtaking. Unfortunately, desperate people living on the streets are doing desperate things to survive. The Mail reports that even in some of the nicest neighborhoods in the Big Apple, some people are stealing goods and reselling them just a couple of blocks away from where they committed the theft. And those are actually the least worst cases happening out there. According to Joel Kotkin, the Presidential Fellow in Urban Futures at Chapman University and Executive Director of the Urban Reform Institute, The social decay that is rotting the foundations of U.S. cities is systemic and getting worse over time. When my grandparents migrated to New York from Russia over a century ago, they found the city that was paradise, one that provided a pathway towards a better life, he wrote. However, life was tough, crowded, and always a paycheck from poverty. My relatives were poor, but so was everyone. Eventually, they all bought houses or apartments and entered the middle class. Today's urban promise is vastly different, the researcher notes. New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles are no longer cities of aspiration. They are increasingly defined by an almost feudal hierarchy. The rich live well, protected by private security and served by local coffee shops and trendy clubs. Meanwhile, the working class struggles to pay rent, possesses no demonstrable path to a better life, and as a result, often migrates elsewhere, Kotkin highlights. Offense rates are soaring everywhere, and homelessness, once an exception, is increasingly widespread. Those very streets once said to be paved with gold are now filled with discarded needles, excrement, and graffiti, the expert added. The truth is that entrenched urban poverty in the United States, defined by places where 30% or more of the population live below the poverty line, actually ballooned from 1,100 to 6,400 neighborhoods since the year 2000. Even the controlled media admits that in the past 2 decades, major cities have gone from engines of growth and opportunity to places defined by worsening inequality. Wealth and income disparity is becoming the norm. For example, in the tech haven of San Francisco, which has the worst levels of inequality in California, the top 5% of households earn an average of $808,105 annually, compared to a mere $16,184 for the lowest 20%. That's annually. The old saying that the city air makes one free all too often means freedom to be poor, to experience endemic homelessness, collapsing public infrastructure, and rising neglect, Kotkin says. In the state where it's no longer considered a felony to steal anything worth less than $1,000, there has been property theft, including a huge rise in carjackings. Since 2019, Walgreens closed over 30 outlets in San Francisco due to skyrocketing cases of retail theft and weak law enforcement. At the same time, New York small businesses experienced a 222% increase in burglaries last year. As cities slowly fall to pieces, they are increasingly becoming no-go zones for investors and business. Barely 10% of U.S. companies are interested in investing in large urban areas, the expert reveals. Cities do not thrive by having more cutting-edge coffee shops, trendy restaurants, and edgy boutiques. They need safe streets. They need decent schools and jobs for middle and working-class families, Kotkin stresses. Sadly, it appears that our leaders are not too worried about restoring the economic and social balance this country needs to start thriving again. Year after year, our social decline intensifies and our major cities continue to collapse all around us. If you love America, you should be completely disgusted by what is happening to our country. What do you think our founders would say if they could see what our cities have become? They would certainly be deeply ashamed of us. And we should be deeply ashamed of ourselves too, because we should have never allowed our beloved country to sink so low.